First of all, what do you protect? So most of the industry are having different need. Each is having a different crown jewels. So intellectual property, personal identifiable information, payment. Where do you protect it and how do you protect it are the other two main pillar on the conversation. But when do you think to be safe is the key one. Because if you don't measure what you protect, where and how, and when you really feel like you are secure, even if we all know that we will never be 100% secure, but at least having this parameter measurable and well known is important. I see often in the industry people talking about security but not focus on what they are protecting. So uh, one of the main issue that we see is the transformation of the industry from asset-centric to data-centric. So when you protect from a data breach, you want to avoid the data exfiltration. So you need to be aware which asset contain which data. That is mandatory to update your strategy. So one of the problem is the segmentation within silo by silos within CISO. So we have the information security management, the security operation, the security architecture, and the business with the board, the strategy, the budget, what they define as a roadmap. We shouldn't forget that all these functions should be synced. And even if it sounds like an easy statement, it's not so easy, and I will show you why. So we are helping ourselves with standard, best practice, guidelines, but at the end, we are like an orchestra. We need to be sure to we need to be sure to have everybody sync across the season. And so the problem is you can take the best professional out there and let them work together. But if they are not sync, it's like an orchestra. Each instrument need to be tuned, and the CISO is actually having that function to sync them all. But there are some issues that are built in the way how the CISO function is structured, and I will touch upon that. So we need a balance between technology and professional. Uh, Most of the time I hear, especially in architecture, a lot of discussion about product, a lot of discussion without setting the requirement, without thinking that is a strategy. Security is not just a product, and it can be done just by one approach to that. For example, if you are working on avoiding data exfiltration, your uh, your strategy should be across the data, across the network and the media where you can exfiltrate the data, but also on how you track, how you categorize. And so, as you see, is everything about a strategy, not a product. You can have whatever product, it will not fix your problem in 360 degrees. Integration across the tools is another big issue because everybody is somehow looking for the best technical product, but they don't integrate quite well. So especially right now that there are cut on budgets and whatever else, you see how integration is becoming the key point on business. So tools are a good way for an analyst, for uh, whoever in the business to simplify their work. It's good, and it's the reason why everything is moving big data, also security. If you check, it's the trend is anyway that, and everything is becoming sec DevOps, and that means integration by design. So we need to spend a bit more time also on people, not just in technology. We know how important security awareness it is, and how sometimes it's not just the awareness, it's also our own people. So getting skills, Sometimes get confused also that to do security you need to study only security. It's not true. Security was never designed to be an entry-level kind of job. It's supposed everybody to have a knowledge of a technology and be so knowledgeable about that to build on top of that a real expertise and secure it. So we found a lot of security professionals that actually are not studying, for example, cloud in the way it should. If you check all pen testing courses are extremely focused on the fundamental that are extremely important, don't take me wrong, but there are some specific in cloud that need to always be there. And forensics is most of the time out of the loop in the conversation, and it's quite wrong because you can't be in an industry where every day there is a data breach and don't invest in forensics at all. So DevSecOps should be actually the converged layer where all these topics get integrated. Spend more time on people that will do that integration is key, mandatory for that. And to make it, you need a good environment, a safe environment, an environment that look after their own employees. And initiative like First is the biggest organization for incident response, created a standard called the Ethical First, and is looking after the work-life balance of security analysts, of entire CISO function, somehow the ethics around it. I think we, as an industry, we should stress more that we can't expect to perform well when we don't invest on the team also from their own career growth perspective. So I see keep really good people in key roles but don't move. And after a while, they get frustrated. The workload in security is high. We all know that. And so we should look after the integration, but not only about the technology, but also about the people that will integrate that. Internal threat is another big concern. Job insecurity, digital transformation are all anyway going to impact the internal threat risk. So what is happening is more than once we hear news about hiring ad hoc to exfiltrate data, internal threat, but it's difficult. The internal threat framework to be established within a company is one of the most complicated things because in the strategy integrates DLP, HR, processes heavily, and all this has to be integrated too. So some least privilege access is a good concept, but you can find internal threat that are having administrative access. So a rethinking around the integration and the automation to reduce um, the exposure and in somehow the internal threat opportunities is important. Obviously, you need to trust the people that you work with. I'm not saying differently, but we are all security professionals, so we need to think on all threat model on that side. So here I'm trying to show you how different are the inputs across the function. So as you heard a few minutes ago, I was saying that there are some sync within CISO function as well. And so work in team and work in sync is mandatory. And one of the reasons of this async is also that each security professional see and use the completely different input. You see how threat intelligence is based on information. You see uh, anomaly detection, trying to combine input, having a big data approach. Threat modeling is extremely complicated because most of the threat modeling, like the strike model, is more about the application, not really about the infrastructure. I will dedicate an entire video about it. So I hope you'll find interesting also that conversation in the future. new attack vectors is always a continuous evolution of a threat, and every side of a CISO is anyway looking after a portion of that sometimes. Think about uh, how the overall CISO function can change a perspective of a topic. So we do help ourselves with framework, we have legal requirements, we have guideline, we have pillar that obviously make that organization to work, to be well structured. We have a security model, a maturity model, for example, is not mentioned there because I didn't write it, but there is also the SOC maturity model. There are cloud maturity model, and many other option to try to understand how it's working and how mature is the organization. The problem is that the output of a CISO function is also completely different. Who is evaluating a risk is going to update the risk registry. There is an audit and compliance reports. Others are feeding, and I hope in a dynamic manner, a threat model with feeds. There is documentation on high-level design, vulnerability management report, incident reports, and all is going to contribute on the security roadmap. So let's be honest, the amount of output and the syntax of that output is completely different based on which approach you, which team of CISO you are. The risk should be connected to a threat. You will not expect to have an evaluation of the risk without updating also the risk. And vision is obviously a conversation that all risk professionals keep in mind all the day. So I'm not judging and saying that one is not effective. I'm just saying that overall, the CISO function is having completely different input, a completely different output as well, and they produce documentation and process. And actually, the reason why you have a process is to combine all vision. So the typical orchestra conversation that I had before. But let's be honest, it's not always so easy because we do find ourselves with GRC management that focus more on risk registry, audit and compliance, the leadership more focus on security roadmap, budget, prioritization or from a business perspective, security operation, more on vulnerability management, incident reports, and the architecture is trying to keep up with the threat model, look at the high level, trying to follow the infrastructure roadmap, but each output can be standalone, not always get linked to each other. And that's create the first asymmetry. And so let's take an example on how the threat is different than risk. So uh, if you drive a car, risk is to have a car accident. The threat can be the snow, lose control of a car due to rain. Uh, there are tons of threats. And so even the remediation approach is completely different. Not everything can be fixed having winter tires. And so the same it's working in security. The concept of risk is actually grouping a topic in terms of what is the business impact of that, what is the risk for the company. It's also based on which business you are. It's based on the principle of the CS, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But let's be honest, we need to find a link between the threat and the risk because the threat continuously change. So it's the reason why threat modeling, the modern one, is more based on threat feed because actually every time change. But we can't even focus everything on a meter attack because let's be honest, the technique are not always relevant. The meter attack is quite fragmented. You have a mobile, you have the IoT, you have the cloud right now, and so combine them all in a big picture is not easy. And so if you see the challenge is clear to everybody, but the answer across the industry is not there yet in some. And so we do see this async day by day when we read news about incidents. And I'm professional for the last 20 years. The last things that I would comment is somebody has a problem, but we always try to learn a lesson, even if it's not coming from our own incident. And let's be honest, the industry need more black box thinking. So trying to understand what you can get out of somebody else's incident and understanding what you are missing within your organization. So the food for thought for this slide is actually, the entire presentation is actually based on how do we fix this problem and how we can if continuously we have a completely different input, a completely different output async. So each function is having a loop and it's based on industry standard. Here in the slide you see a vulnerability management life cycle. You have an input, you discover, you prioritize the assets, you assess, you report, you remediate, you verify, and here again. And in the reporting, you have the output that goes out. But let's be honest, we need to sync it because if you have an incident, you want to to be sure that all CISO functions are aware and the risk adjusted, the threat get updated, and so it's more complicated than what it looks on this statement. So I'm not great in graphics, but what I'm trying to represent here is each loop based on each function. And so, for example, vulnerability management was the one that we just zoom in. Let's see the incident management is following the detection, containment, post-incident, preparation, and so on. The same of this loop is for security architecture. You have TOGAF kind. SecDevOps is actually based on the pipeline. GRC should be linked to all these functions because let's be honest, if you don't patch, you have an issue and your risk need to be evaluated. And you shouldn't patch. You should patch always, but you understood what I mean. You need to have a risk registry that is the actual picture at that time. It's true, you review the risk every 6 months, 3 months, depends on how you set it, but it has to be a continuous work. And it has to be a continuous work aligned with all function. And so if a risk get evaluated only linking to a threat model, similar to what Trike threat modeling does, is trying to link the two, and each loop would have a threat model input that is actually the output of their own life cycle, it would be great because you'll see in one place the same picture. So let's see, for example, how the industry is trying to move in that direction. Because think about the success of Power BI, big data approach is actually having all data in a big data lake and trying to get information out of it in terms of reporting. But you can use it also to evaluate what is your threat model. How many multi-cloud solutions are, for example, based on establishing coverage layer, where you actually collect all auditing information across all multi-cloud environment, and you centralize those, and from that you see the security posture. So the having this kind of sync is becoming way more easier, especially in cloud. But we need to get all per CISO silo a bit less silo and find a way to combine. It will happen, it will be natural, it will be an evolution, but it's a bit behind compared to the technology available. It's the same conversation with other things, for example, forensics. Let's be honest, forensics is becoming way easier right now in cloud because you can automate forensics. But you see a lot of people still thinking about the man in black coming with the suit and doing the magic. It shouldn't be. It should be continuous forensics. There are slot kit, volatility, a lot of tools that can automate and can be integrated in the pipeline. So we need to change a bit the vision of the industry on that. So uh, put it at the center of a threat model, or you can move it, change it to a sort of big data approach where you define what is the metrics that you want. You can be a security posture. You can link the risk to the security posture if you prefer. It depends on how is the organization, depends on how is the structure. I did work on high-level enterprise design framework like TOGAF, SAPSA, where you even analyze the business function. But at the same time, I work on engineering, also zooming in on the solutioning. So I did see both sides, and they need to have a link. It's sometimes the problem of the industry is even with a sync between the same function, and you see how different is the approach when you are presenting a problem to a board. It's still a security problem, but you need to translate in business impact. You need to translate a technical problem into a business problem and explain what's the impact, what is happening. But it's also true that we need to consider that you never spend to protect an asset that costs 10k, 15k. And most of the problem is here also quantify. So the main issue is security is seen as a cost, and quantify is difficult, extremely difficult. Think about intellectual properties. It's not always easy. There are some way to quantify things, but it's tricky. So centralize not just the CISO. I started the security in 2001 when actually everybody was uh, owning the security. Most everybody was so specialized in the technology that security was part of their duty. It's a bit sad after so many years to hear people, but I'm not CISO. I'm not. I don't do security. Let's be honest. Everybody does security. Everybody is part of a security posture. Security awareness is one of the main duty for all all companies. So what we have to do is to be practical, not theoretical. And so we do see this one, especially in cloud. Uh, Too big abstract conversation are not working. You need to stay stick to what is the practical side of that. You need to talk about lateral move. You need to have an understanding of how an attack is performed, how it's changing the picture. Uh, let's think all these SD-WAN changes, the container security. There are tons of technology that change the way to see into problems. Uh, the concept of service mesh in security wasn't there before in infrastructure as a service. So you always had a sort of gateway. Still right now, it's unbelievable to not be so practical and don't base design on API gateway. Why? Because actually it should be the key. Is one of the main attack vector API, but is having so much throughput that most of the time doesn't get even the monitor attention. And so an attacker knows that poking an API is a bit more easier sometimes. So that's not right. We need to be practical. Um, I don't like the I love the idea of threat modeling. I did work on that in various way, and we will discuss that in another ad hoc video. But I don't like the fact that it's a static picture. Static picture is nice, but it's like an X-ray. You don't see how when you move the bones. You need to think in threat model in a dynamic manner, not in a static. Automation is obviously clear to everybody that is the future, and we need to invest in that. But it's changing also the threat model itself. It's attack an orchestrator means attack an entire infrastructure. And most of the design is moving into an untrusted domain with completely different trusted boundaries. Let's think on what does it mean, for example, to have MPLS over the WAN through an SD-WAN. It's completely new things for infrastructure. It was always at the bottom in a trusted domain within the LAN. Move all this in this way, it's changing. Having an orchestrator that is actually a SaaS service is changing. Uh, Having problem where Cloud Shell, you can't even have a CASB in the middle because they most of the cloud service providers don't want nothing in the middle for obvious reason. But you understand how difficult is and all this automation. The fact that okay, you can use Terraform playbook and whatever, but you see how it's changing the picture of some threat modeling. If you compromise that, you compromise the entire infrastructure in one shot. How many products are not yet supporting rotation of tokens? Uh, you see playbook in automation with token, but it's disgrace. But it's actually a problem of the industry. We are everybody is aware. Everybody told that there is a problem, but not everybody is looking at the big picture. That is within the organization, as I told you, the sync between all function, but it's also within the automation. You are having infra driving a change and security trying to keep up to that change instead of actually doing together. And the automation and the attack surface is changing. Let's think the API exposure onto a SaaS service is anyway most of the time shared because the API gateway endpoint that you are going to contact is shared, is multi-tenant most of the time. All these kind of considerations are changing the picture. The fact that supply chain is becoming so easy and popular. So automation, yes, but it's not just an answer. It has to be part of a full reconsideration of infrastructure. Uh, so reduce your technology budget footprint integrating multiple projects, reflecting the loop you designed for your life cycle. API integration is helping. Means that we are in 2021 now. Everybody is looking for cloud migration. I witnessed the first digital transformation project in Europe before SaaS focus, later shift and lift kind of focus, now container, multi-cloud. We are going to scaling and scaling quite fast. But if you reduce the budget at the same time because you went for a pay-as-you-go model, it's going to create problem as well. So having full visibility, that could be, for example, through the API gateway that I'll talk about, it's key. It's vital. Also from an incident response perspective, because all this automation need to be visible. Uh, I think there is also an unfair way to deal with security professionals, but no, I'm talking more about who doesn't consider themselves a security professional. Uh, with all this data center closing, a lot of monopoly in terms of cloud service provider, there are database admin that they would be the best one to work in security because they know the inside out of the technology. As an industry, there is a lot of push on having the security guy to know Metasploit. No, security is to secure whatever you secure, the data, the asset, but you need to know the technology. And so I struggle to see this problem of not having professional because if you don't let them to be part of a security because they contribute to the market for 10 years and they know the inside out. Let's be honest. How many security professionals are studying uh, uh, the the Windows internals when actually there is people that is 15 years that is working on it. So we are pushing a lot of good security professional that are less part of the buzzword to move into researches to find their own niche. But we don't let fresh blood to come with experience that they gained before just because they don't know Metasploit. And they would be the best one to design stuff because everything is evolving, but it was having a bit of history from where it was coming from. Even if you have experience with mainframe, it could have been useful on thinking. And so we need to open a bit the industry somehow. Eh, Another problem that I see is quantify, understand how the security posture is getting better. A lot of investment, but you need to have a KPI. You need to have a return of investment. You need to monitor how good you are. And continuous compliance, continuous forensics, continuous improvement of a skill of a security team, of the integration. That is the way to do it. It's not that automatically you do a stand-up call and you become agile and you have fixed the problem of the industry. You need to have an understanding of what is your performance, how you are sure that you are getting better on securing, what is the parameter that you use to do that. Uh, some use time incident closure time of the incident. It's not a big, great way. You get a bunch of problem and you just close it. So your stats are not real. And let's be honest, we need to work more on having the big picture. I got surprised on how cloud is making that easier because let's think on now the integration of orchestrator with a cloud, having also agent, which kind of telemetry can give in real time. But we need to understand what we see as the improvement and test it over and over. There are I remember when I started to work on web application firewall 2007, 2008. So a lot of web application firewall needed the learning phase, the pain to use it in a testing environment, to be sure that we were not learning something wrong. But there was that idea of testing. You see also newcomers in the market, Infection Monkey, for example, that is adopting the chaos engineering into the testing of a security of environment. Those are good way of thinking. A/B testing is helping as well. So we need to try to keep going on thinking on how to test security as well. And test security is not only pen testing, is not only red teaming, because lateral moves are complex, are really complex, and we need to be sure that, for example, you can't work in the security of a container and don't think that there is a way to move to an infrastructure as a service instance. We have this kind of vision in the industry to just analyze a chunk defined by a big category and nothing else. The attacker can't care. The attacker move wherever he can. And actually, the new design in cloud, we are moving from an, a, a double hopping kind of design to way more flat. VPC, tons of network, just the firewall rules on the VPC, I mean, and here we go. That's need even more testing, and testing is easier now. And so not just automating the tools, but also thinking the testing. So I like to think about rugby. because rugby is the only sport where everybody can have a completely different shape. There is the big one, there is the fastest. Everybody does work in team. So we can't expect to hire all over the same people, grouping them together because they think alike, they use the same input, they do the same output, and to be okay across the organization to send the message and change the security posture. We need way, way more diversity. And diversity means that at the time that everybody will have to learn. There is nobody that will avoid that. It's 20 years that I study every night. And so it doesn't matter what is your field. You need to keep up. And if you give up, you're out of the market. That's the truth. And if you want to protect something, you need to know how to get attacked and even continuously understand how change. And so you need the collaboration of everybody and you need diversity. Diversity in thinking, diversity on having people that disagree, people that actually can add a completely different point of view, but people that is also coming from different background. So I'm a motorcyclist. I always laugh about the fact that you are having a lot of engineering, designing mechanical engineer, designing chain, disc lock, and later on arrives somebody completely from a completely different walk of life and just doing pass it. That is a good example. You don't care what he studied, you care how he thinking. And so we need to have more people from infra, more people from uh, all all walk of life with better understanding. Think on how technology and lateral move is is speeding up all this stuff, and how you need the collaboration of everybody. How storage in cloud is changing. It's not just the S3 bucket that is here and here, so that is making the news. It's about all type of moving information. Think about how much you need uh, analysts to have completely different skills, not just the way how to query stuff. They need to understand how infra is, and that is a big, big challenge. And so diversity, it has to be there. And you need diversity in every meaning, also in terms of personal attitude. We are in the industry pushing out people that is shy. I spent something like 5 years to convince myself to be on this YouTube video because I never been really keen to show myself and presenting. At the end of the day, it's like to go to a conference. Why is a kind of conference is not okay on YouTube? And so I changed my mind. But it's not easy for everybody. Everybody does have a completely different approach. We can't say that somebody is good in an industry where shy people that never show themselves is not considered because it is not mainstream. It's wrong. So we need to change also this approach. All these focus on conference. You are cool if you did conference. Now you have tons of conferences, but what's the quality of that most of the time? So reuse project automating, that's the key. Absolutely. And reuse project, reuse open source, trying to understand about the problem, not about the tool. And there are tons of good initiative out there. There are tons of good repo on GitHub projects. Uh, you can find project design across production environments. And so you do have also maturity of some of the project. Pay attention what you do and what you run. Consider the risk of that, but try to reuse. Don't reinvent the wheel. trying to use standard and product that are designed with stuff. So at the end of the day, you should consider that your risk registry should be sync with the threat model. The vulnerability management should generate and be aligned with incident lesson learned. Uh, Architecture should consider all threats. CISO should be capable to be not just a vertical silo, but horizontal across all organization. So here I wrote a bit of summary on what I think. So you should define your risk based on your threat. So be threat centric. Trying to understand what you want to measure also is important. Evaluate the quality of your feeds. It's not just getting a lot of information that help you. You need to be sure what you are paying attention to. Each security function need to follow a loop in a continuous evolution, but should be linked to a threat model. Try to sync also the output, trying to find a common dictionary between the risk guy, the infra, the pen tester, because we can move all conversation just on risk acceptance or risk outsourcing. We need to focus on which security control you could have, and to have that vision, you need a well-structured conversation. Keep your threat model updated. Automate and reuse projects that you can trust for their quality, that you can be sure about, but orchestrate and trying to integrate it. Work in integration. If I think something that is missing in security is the security integrator function. So there is no role that is just looking after the integration. Everybody bought tons of tools, and it should be part also of a budget saving. Trying to understand which tool integrate with what, how they communicate, how they actually contribute to the posture, and trying to save money as well, and trying to understand if it's still actual. If you choose a product 3 years ago, it could be that today is not up to for the challenge. And so you need to understand also how the legacy will work, the exit strategy. Everything has to be considered on the security posture, because you can't, in the meantime that you migrate, to reduce your security posture as well. So it's the reason why I do actually like having talking with CISO about security strategy, work on how you integrate the tools, but especially understanding how you keep in check the security posture. And let's be honest, it's not that the security posture means that you are bulletproof. But as everybody always told, doing compliance is not doing security, and exceed on that space, it's not so difficult how it looks. You can have the due diligence to trying to understand how works everything. In your engine, all pistons need to be sync. If one piston goes out of sync, the engine doesn't run. CISO function should be the same, well sync and align. And use use brainstorming is smart teams. Put it as you want. Adapt it to your company culture. That is important, because you can't introduce something that is not okay with the company culture. Uh, I do think that is also based on your way to work. If you are extremely siloed, it's becoming difficult, and I do understand it, to establish a smart team across function. But you need to make it in a way that is more um, open to conversation, to new ideas, and balance investment in technology and people in the meaning of looking for diversity. Continuously monitor and test your results, and check if he's really delivering what you expected.